Well, for more insight into the Masters, I spoke with Manish Tripathi. He is an assistant professor of marketing at Emory University's Goizueta Business School, and I began the interview asking him how the golf industry is doing overall.
Well, if you look at the golf industry in sort of the past 10, 15 years, it's been kind of fascinating. The sort of 2000s saw a huge increase across the board, both with golf manufacturers, golf courses, partially perhaps because of the economy and the Tiger effect. But the last few years, there has been a bit of a downturn, or rather not as great growth as they saw in the past. So if you look sort of over the last 5 years or so, there's been a downturn in growth, a bit of a stabilization that they're seeing. And I think that's partially due to perhaps the Tiger effect, also partially due perhaps to an over-anticipation of the growth of golf in the earlier years.
And for those who don't play golf, the Tiger effect is the impact that he had on sales for the sport. He was so popular in the 90s and 2000s that people were rushing to purchase golf things that typically wouldn't have, right? I mean, we saw a big surge in the golf industry as a result of his playing.
Absolutely. He sort of, starting in 1997, sort of was a perfect storm. His performance, his background, not just winning, but the way that he won, really raised the expectations for golf and got a whole new segment of consumers interested in the sport.
And so what's your opinion? You know, you've got a lot of other names that are coming, Rory McIlroy, Bubba Watson, Henrik Stevenson, Jason Day. Mm-hmm. Is there somebody that's going to take up that mantle, that Tiger mantle, and get golf as an industry economically back on its feet?
Well, it looks like Nike hopes that it'll be Rory McIlroy. They've made a large investment in him. But, you know, it's one of those things where golf has been a victim of its own success. Because Tiger put the bar so high with his dominance in this sport, the next person can't just be good, they have to be great to move the needle. So
superstar, we need a superstar.
Exactly, a superstar. And the good news is that I think the last few years have seen the emergence of a lot of good young talent. Now the question is, who is it going to be? It could be Bubba, could be Rory, could be someone else that we haven't even really heard of yet. But there's a lot of potential talent that's there. The problem is the bar is really high for them to have to become a superstar in this sport now.
And of course, we're having this whole conversation because the Masters begin this week. The Masters expected to be more or less profitable than last year.
It will definitely be more profitable, I'll say, just because Tiger's playing.
It all comes down to Tiger, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I think for a lot of things it does, especially, I mean, it's amazing. If you look at the ratings for the Masters, they were down last year significantly because there was no Tiger. Even before that, when Tiger doesn't do well in the tournament or if he's not in contention, you see a drop in the ratings for the Masters.
So it's really that simple. There's nothing that the industry itself can do to promote these big events. I mean, the Masters is a beautifully produced event from a television perspective.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, the Masters is still going to do well overall. I was just saying compared to last year, it will do better. They do a lot of things great at the Masters. I mean, first of all, it's a unique situation. It's a sort of an event that is played in the same venue year after year, mm-hmm. as opposed to some of the other majors. There is it's almost a shrine to golf. You have such high demand of spectators who want to come watch the sport and such low supply of actually tickets. And then from, as you said, a TV perspective, they have a lot of control over the production of that event, and they do a spectacular job. So the Masters will do just fine. I just think they'll do better this year because Tigers is on board.
Focus so much on the impact of Tiger, but he's had, you know, back problems and obviously a lot of personal issues. Is he still marketable because he's sort of no longer the golden boy, if you will, when it comes to being able to draw in, you know, let's say a young family player, something like mm-hmm. that? Do you think that there's that he still has a place to attract the kind of viewership and the kind of attention that he used to?
I absolutely think he does, and I think Nike, I'm sure, believes that as well. If you just saw recently, they released a commercial right before the Masters, which it's for Rory in some sense, but Tiger is heavily featured in that commercial. And I think the reason I say he's also marketable is if you go back to the early 90s and early 2000s, those group of people that Tiger got them interested in golf, let's say they were in their 20s mm-hmm. or early 30s or even younger, those people have matured, now have higher disposable incomes, so they're ready to spend, and they still are followers of Tiger. So there's still a large segment that he attracts, and I think just that aura still calls in people around the world to follow him. So I think he's marketable. I think a lot of companies still think he's marketable as well.
Now, what about the global growth of this sport? Because it doesn't all just hang on one person's shoulder. You know, China recently closed 60 or more courses. If the game can't count on the growth in China, which has been really one of the largest growth markets for the sport, are there other countries that can pick up the slack?
Well, I think, to be fair, there is still growth in China. The closing of courses is interesting. There was a law, or 2004 ban on new courses that existed, I think, which was cited to close some of these courses down. At the same time, you're seeing new courses pop up that are just being called remodels instead of new courses. So there is still some growth. I think what may have happened was an overestimation. Perhaps there was an expectation, and I hate to go back to Tiger all the time, but that if he had continued to play well, we'd have continued to see a larger growth rather than that decline after 2008, 2009. And so there might have been over-expectation where a lot of courses opened up and we're not growing as fast as we had expected. So the game is still growing in China, especially amongst, of course, the super wealthy. But I think you can look to markets such as the Middle East, obviously South Korea, and to some extent India as well. For growth, you're going to get growth, but it's not going to be the type of growth that we saw a decade ago, right? It's going to be a slow and steady growth in some of these countries.
So then where do you see the sport financially going in the next 5 to 10 years? Are we going to see what we saw 10, 20 years ago?
I'm optimistic about the growth. I don't think we're going to see it at the levels that we saw in the past. But I think because, as we mentioned earlier, the new talent that's coming in, overall, it's going to raise the quality of golf. Even if you don't have a superstar, as we've seen in the past, if you have some really good players, that will attract people to the sport as some of the people who are now growing up watching golf start having more disposable income. You'll see more of that going into golf. So, and as the economy is now recovered, golf has a relationship with the state of the economy as well.
Sure.
So as the economy
recovers,
yep, I think we'll start seeing it go up.